Welcome to the Scott My Show, a podcast where we talk about bodybuilding, health improvement, and physique enhancement. Before we get into the show, I just wanted to let you know that I do offer one-on-one coaching. If you're interested in working with me, I offer personalized coaching where I can help you reach your goals, whether it be fat loss, building muscle, improving your health, or all the above. I provide tailored nutrition, training, and supplementation advice, one or all of those together, with 24/7 ongoing support to help you every step of the way with any questions you may have. If you're interested, you can DM me on Instagram, click the link in my profile to fill out a form, or ask any questions you may have. Also, we can hop on a free consult call where we can go over your goals, answer questions, and discuss what it would look like to work together.
This episode is brought to you by LMNT Electrolytes. This month, we're switching it up with an exclusive offer that's only for VIP LMNT partners, including Carnivore Cast listeners. You can now receive this free sample pack along with any regular purchase when you use my custom link, which is provided in the show notes or my Instagram link in bio. That's drinklmnt.com/carnivorecast, all one word. And as I said, I'll include the link in the show notes. LMNT Electrolytes are convenient, evidence-based, and delicious, and get yours today to help support the show. Thank you.
This is a quick disclaimer before we start the show. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Nothing said here should be taken as medical advice, and please consult with your physician before making any changes to your diet, exercise regime, or medications. Thank you, and on to the show. Jonathan Griffiths at composition_consultant on Instagram is a successful carnivore bodybuilder and brilliant nutrition consultant who helps people get in the best shape of their lives while getting healthier at the same time. Jonathan recently competed for the first time in years and won his show. He has been in the nutrition industry studying carefully for nearly 15 years. He's undertaken several courses around human health, medical science and nutrition, and a herbal science certification. He uses the most up-to-date scientific literature and experience from working with hundreds of individuals with unique health situations. He also puts out a ton of free and valuable content on his Instagram and YouTube channel, both under the handle Composition Consultant. Welcome back to the show, Jonathan.
Cheers, Scott. It's good to be back here for a second time. So anyone listening to this now, if you're listening to this and you enjoy the talk, and we did do an initial talk on the Carnivore cast, which was about a year and maybe a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
So that'll give you some backstory, how I've evolved since then. We'll just go into it straight right now.
Awesome.
Yes, this could be great.
Yeah, definitely. I'll have a link to that. Folks should definitely check that out. So the first thing I wanted to ask you about, Jonathan, is getting back to bodybuilding after back surgery. What was that process like for you?
It's a good question. Yeah, so it was a physical approach, structured approach. I spent a lot of time reading. So I am autistic, I am analytical, I am hyper focused on doing the things I'm passionate about and enjoy. Just like you, Scott, I like to train. I like to manipulate my diet. I like to interact with people like yourselves to find out, a bit more about what's going on deeper beyond the surface. There's no one way to skin a cat, so I'm going to preface everything I say in this video with that. We've seen a lot of success with lots of different approaches, but anyway, what happened was I had my spine fusion on, I believe it was December the 12th, 2022. Since then, I had quite a drastically impressive improvement in symptoms within the first 3 months up until about March 2023. Since that point, I've regressed very, 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 very dramatically to a point where I've had different procedures, different injections, ablation therapy, where they basically burn the nerves in your right hip and lower back area. I've had injections into the bottom of the spine to try and reduce the pain, anti-inflammatories, all the usual sort of stuff they put you through. But what I was thinking was, okay, I competed before on a carnivorous diet. There are some errors I made back then, which I would not have known unless I went through that experience then. So I've obviously manipulated my training and diet since then to try and alleviate things, improve things. And basically what I end up doing, if you had to say, what do you do in a executive summary? I train very instinctively. I give my feel. I do have a structured approach, but my structured approach is based on my symptomology, how I feel going about day by day. And I manage my frequency, my load, my volume, intensity, all based around that. So I basically try to work out what's the minimal effective dose, what's getting the most outcome in terms of my diet, PDs, exercise, things like that. And I've had quite a good success with it considering. Now, what people didn't realize was prior to this competition, I was spending a long, long time in bed. So I was spending all this time like between consultations, YouTube videos, interviews, things like that. If I wasn't doing this, I'd be lying down. I can't stand for more than about 15 to 20 minutes at a time. I can't sit for very long unless I'm in a very comfortable position. As I speak right now, my feet are elevated. I'm sat on a big, 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 big cushion, and I'm just kind of almost like sitting back quite a bit. So it's a bit more comfortable on my lower back and spine. Um, Long story short, what I do have is a spine disease, which is spondylolisthesis. I've had spine fusion, which is essentially they've taken out the disc between the L5 and S1, placed that with an artificial titanium, I believe, disc. And then above that and below that, that's fastened in with 4 bolts and 2 rods. So it means my range of motion is limited. I can touch my toes just about. Putting my socks in the morning, really hard, hurts. Putting my shoes in the morning can be more difficult. I find that I have to like put my shoes on a step to then put my feet into it. Sometimes I can reach down further, I can manipulate my body in certain ways. Off season, that's not happening, as anyone knows. When you're heavy, you're big. You can't breathe that well, so you can't get down to that sort of depth, and your mobility drastically reduces. So I'm currently at a point in a stage of time where I competed in, I believe it was June the 2nd, with a purely carnivorous diet. Yes, I have sweeteners, some seasonings here and there, things like that, coffee. But other than that, 99.9% of my macronutrient intake was from animal foods. So dairy, fish, eggs, meat, that sort of stuff, poultry. And it's been very successful. So I got into contest shape in roughly 3 months.
Wow.
So feel free to interrupt me if you do have any questions as I go along. And
How did you pick a show?
Sure. So I picked the most local show to me. In that I can't travel very far, at least not without a lot of pain. So the most local show to me at this current point in time is in Aldershot, which is roughly about 2 hours away on the train. So I had to make sure for most people, they would just travel up the morning of the show. For me, I couldn't travel, then go on stage. So I had to sort of spread things out a bit. I got the hotel that was within 200 meters or 100 meters of the actual venue where I was competing in. So I had to minimize my step count, all that sort of thing. Just getting to the show was an absolute horror. Everything was micromanaged to minimize my pain, time standing up, time walking around. But if it was a busy day on the trains, for example, I can look online on Google. Oh, busiest these hours. Okay, might not get a seat. So I have to sort of program my whole life around making sure I've got somewhere to sit down. And it's like that day to day to day to day. So I'm not exaggerating when I say my life is managed by 15-minute intervals pretty much. Luckily, I'm quite prepared, quite analytical. Anyone that's seen my calendar will know I've got a lot of stuff going on all the time. But I also program time off. So I do program time where people can't book me in so I can actually rest and recuperate, perhaps between training sessions, lunch, things like that. But yeah, what basically happened was I just followed a carnivorous diet, and my diet for the past 3 to 4 months prior to the show didn't actually change at all. The only changes I did have was that I had increased my fat on what would be typically a carb loading day. And that was just simply 50 to 70 grams extra fat per day. Nothing else, no extra carbs, no protein, nothing, no extra dairy. And that was very successful. So that was based on feel. So over here in the UK, we've got a bodybuilder by the name of Jordan Peters. You probably know who he is, super intense guy, high intensity trainer sort of thing. He's probably the biggest guy around that I've ever seen. He's enormous. He's as thick as he is tall. And what I'll say is he's definitely an advocate for, how to put it, having this sort of structured diet, then using other things as levers to reduce body fat. So I was manipulating my step count slightly. Obviously, I can't do 10,000 steps per day. So maybe I started on 3,000 and maybe I ended up in about 5,000 per day. But also there were times when that would go down to 4,000. All these things were carefully managed. So I was using a lot of the numbers that I could write down. So my scale weight, the photos, lots of subjective and objective markers to reach my endpoint in the safest and most healthy possible way. Looking back at the show now, I can say there's no stone left unturned. There's nothing more I could do to look better. But I do, however, have more data on myself. So I'm now at the point where because I was dieting for a long period of time and being able to actually reverse diet, maintain very good body composition in spite of that. And I'm at a cruising point now where I'm actually increasing my food intake, but I'm not gaining body fat. So I'm using digital body fat calipers to measure my body fat. The scale, that I stand on, that's a pretty good indicator. I try to keep my weight quite steady because, as we know, once we get a certain body weight as a larger bodybuilder, we do find that we can run into issues where we have elevated blood pressure. And that's something which I've never actually personally had. I've never had issues with blood pressure. And I feel that's partly because I don't let my weight swing too far in one direction.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Scott, I'm not as chiseled as you in the face, so I hold all my fat on my face. So I've been on show day, and I start to look a bit Skeletor on show day, but that's about it. So yeah, it's funny how we store body fat, but yeah, I can say I did all I could and I achieved exactly what I wanted to achieve. But in 3 months' time, roughly, or about 3 months' time by the time this video might air, I'll be at the British finals, just
Awesome.
executing an even better plan using the data from my previous contest. So yeah, do you have any questions about that at all?
Yeah, that's excellent. So glad to hear that. And yeah, I know you're very intelligent and very meticulous, so I'm not surprised that you took that approach. What did your baseline diet look like before starting, and then at the very start of prep? What was like a day of eating like for you?
Sure, yeah. So I'd guess I'd have to look back at about February, March sort of time, but what I was probably eating is about 350 protein per day, roughly 20, 30 grams of carbs day free, dairy, eggs, and I actually include coffee in my carbohydrate amount because it does have some carbs. I'm over the top. You probably don't need to track coffee unless you're having like 20 a day. And the fat intake was north of 350 grams.
Wow.
Sometimes it's higher, sometimes it's lower. So, like you guys that are perhaps in the carb centric model of bodybuilding, where you guys might have periods where you might do carb cycling, I might almost do fat cycling. So, I have a few days a bit higher. Then, if I gain a bit of body fat, I might just do a mini cut for a week, but it wouldn't be a drastic cut. It'd just be,
Yeah.
drop down to 200 grams of fat where I still feel like I've eaten enough food, then just upped it and lowered it from there. And the protein amount we got to 350 by trial and error over the past 15 years of consuming various different amounts, and that's where I land. That's where my appetite takes me. And I've tried even with the higher fat approach, my protein intake is still very high. So that's where it basically started with. So I basically had a high fat, high protein diet, low carb, carnivorous. Um, then I sort of nailed down, okay, I need to try and get about 350 protein in because that's where I sort of ended up. So I kind of figure you have a protein amount per kilo of body mass, lean body mass. And I thought if I can maintain it for as long as possible, but lower the fat until I start to drop the body fat, I'll get the result I want. And yeah, for the basically 3 months straight, I just ate the same protein, carbs, and fats every single day, bar the high days, which were somewhere between 7 and 14 days apart for the last 7 weeks.
Okay.
And what's funny is I actually looked at my chronometer app recently. And if we looked at calories as a measurement, it's just the overarching number of all three macronutrients that we had. So
Yeah.
it gives people an idea in a sense. I'm not a fan of tracking it though. And my calorie amount was, say, started here and it ended by the end of that 5 month period, 4 month period, just slightly elevated, slightly higher.
Wow.
So I got into contest shape eating more calories. What I basically did was I elevated the protein, dropped the fat.
Okay.
So this is an old school practice that the British bodybuilders would do, where I'm sure people universally in the States would do it as well. Protein up 10 grams, fat down 10 grams, protein up to it does work. It is effective. The only problem is some people get digestive issues, and there becomes a point where some people can start to have issues with the protein intake being too high.
Yeah.
It can upset their guts a little bit, and that's just not me. I can tolerate large amounts of protein. I did make a mistake in my last contest prep while I was eating 550 grams of protein per day for
Wow.
9 months straight. It did work. I did get shredded. I was more active then though, but I knew now less active after spinal fusion surgery, perhaps half the output I'd usually have. If I walk the dog for 40 minutes, then I walk him now for like 10, 15 minutes at a
Yeah.
time. So obviously my body's doing less, so I can't get away with as much food.
Yeah.
So I learned from that my digestive system's a bit better for it. And yeah, that's been it in a nutshell.
So you were at 350 fat the whole time through the.
I got down to 120 fat, and I pretty much maintained it.
Okay. And
Yeah,
what were your primary food choices? Like what foods were you using the most?
I'd say if you looked at my plate, what made up the largest space in my bowl, for example, I'd probably say it as lean beef mince, so 5% fat beef mince or
Okay.
ground beef. So that was pretty much it. So I just form these like burger patties, make a few of them, maybe two or three of them. Add a bit of sugar-free ketchup sometimes, some salt, pepper, stuff like that. Maybe I have an egg on it, maybe a little bit of cheese. Those sort of things tend to go out the window a little bit as you go through the fat loss journey because you need more nourishment. So you end up chasing more nutrient dense foods with more potassium, because as your insulin levels lower, you do end up needing more sodium, more potassium, things like that, just to keep your body hydrated. Because otherwise you dump a load basically when you get very lean. Staying hydrated when you're that lean is really hard, guys.
Yeah.
So then I implemented a few electrolytes, maybe the last 2, 3, 4 weeks. But yeah, animal foods. I do eat fish. I'd say I eat fish probably 4 or 5 times a week. So serving a fish there. Eggs hit and miss. Sometimes I'll have them for like a week, sometimes none at all. When I do have them, I'd have like maybe three in a bowl, something like that. I consume whey protein, Greek yogurt, things like that. Butter. Um, I make in contest prep. I made these carnivore ice creams, which were it's been about a month now, but raw milk, whey protein, and some eggs, just in a homemade ice cream maker thing that churns itself up.
Yeah.
Take it out of the fridge, freezer, that sort of thing. They're quite good. After the gym, it's a nice treat. It kept me on plan because I knew every day I get a cheat meal.
Yeah.
It didn't halt my fat loss results. The carbohydrates in it, which were like 15 grams, didn't ruin my body. And I enjoyed it and felt great doing it. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I eat. So a mixed animal foods diet, nothing particularly
Got it.
omitted. I don't consume fruit, don't consume honey, don't consume vegetables. I do consume seasonings, but that's largely it.
Yeah. Yeah. Super interesting. And I imagine you weren't able to leverage much cardio given your condition. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we only actually added in cardio, I think, maybe 7 weeks out, and that started at like 10 minutes after the gym sessions. We like to keep things really simple, my coach and I. So we just thought, add in 10 minutes after the gym, before you do your 50-minute cycle home, and that was it. Elliptical trainer, slow, high incline walk. The least abrasive things I could possibly do on my joints. So I was stable, so I was always holding to the machine. I did feel a bit like at times. Have you ever seen the Rocky 4 movie
Yeah.
where Ivan Drago hits him in the face and he's like he looks almost like drunk? I was like that the entire prep for the last 2 months. Could barely absorb any information. I couldn't construct sentences like I can now.
Yeah.
My memory started to go. I used to walk downstairs to make my food, and I'd be like, "What am I doing?" And I'd
Yeah.
just walk back upstairs, then miss a meal, and have to eat 2 meals later.
I know
So
that.
the stuff like that was happening most days. I
Yeah.
was dropping things on the floor. I was clumsy. So yeah, I had a good time. I did the work.
Yeah. Yeah. You really worked your butt off and it showed. And what was your training like during this time? How do you train? You mentioned being instinctive, but what are some of the tenets of your training?
My training are just getting in the gym and out the gym. Um, as an autistic individual, I'm light sensitive, so these places do have bright, harsh light, just so they can actually light up the gym area and gym space, which makes sense. They're often very noisy, so it's not a pleasant place for me to be beyond a certain point. So I will go in there with my headphones on, usually quite covered up. Try to reduce my blue light exposure. And what I also would do in terms of training was basically scale back all the volume, then go from there and just gradually increase it, see if it elicited any kind of training performance benefit or muscle gain effect, but it never did. I used to notice that in my check-in photos, I'd look worse the more I trained.
Huh.
And there was actually a period of about 20 days roughly where I trained 3 times in that whole 20 days. And that was
Wow.
about maybe between, I'd say about 4 and 5 weeks out roughly. So I barely trained in that time, but I was getting good body composition outcome results. Everything was looking on point. Then when I started adding in more walks, more steps, to try and increase fat loss, it didn't serve me. It worked against me. So my body would just backfire the other way. I'd hold more water. My digestion wouldn't feel as good. I'd feel more cranky. I wouldn't sleep as well. So for me, just doing less was more. Um, if I was to take you through my training sessions at that current point in time, it was kind of like a push-pull legs, then mixed posterior kind of day. So
Okay.
chest, shoulders, triceps, back biceps, just lower body quads, hams, calves. The fourth day was hams, back and biceps, but it was obviously the volume was decreased to make up for the fact I'm training more body parts.
Yeah.
In total, my sessions were always below, I'd say 10, maybe 11 sets, and some things I need more warm-ups on. And as many of those sets as possible were to eccentric muscular failure. So to the point where I can't push it anymore. So the weight's stuck. I can't hold it anymore. So the weight, the isometric contraction no longer holds. And I'd lower it as slowly as possible until I just had to drop it. And I use mostly resistance machines nearly entirely. The only things I use dumbbells for were dumbbell curls, I think. But everything else is cables, machines. The thing is, what people don't realize is even the machines can cause me pain. So, for example, a tricep pushdown, I have to engage my core. Okay, fine, great. My core isn't that, but there's a lot of pressure going from my spine, my lower back, my sacrum, and hips. So positioning myself around the gym equipment was quite tough. So I'd had to
Yeah.
find a way to do it. So, for example, I would sit as I am now on a bench with the cable behind me and just go like that. So I have to
Yeah.
find a way. Is there a way to sit down doing this? Basically, that's what I have to keep asking myself. And yeah, it was very effective. Retained really good muscle mass levels.
Yeah.
Body responded very well to the diet and PEDs and training, and all that sort of thing. So yeah, worked pretty well.
Yeah, that's great.
Oh,
Sounds
sorry, and
like
that was largely it is 4 sessions per week.
okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna ask the frequency. And how did you peak for the show? Or I guess one more question on the refeeds. You mentioned you would do, is it a 1 day refeed every 7 to 14 days?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I was never allowed more than 1 day because I'd never needed more than 1 day.
Okay.
I'm one of those people, I can flatten out hard, but it doesn't take a lot to pull me out.
Yeah.
Give me a rest day, give me 50 to 70 grams extra fat. The next day, my body looks as if I've had a week off and rested.
Wow.
More separation. My body does chuck it off. My body's super responsive to things in terms of training and recovery. So I've noticed that, and I've had to. Obviously, there's that fine-tuned point where I can't recover anymore, but I'm
Yeah.
always trying to redline it just a little bit.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
that's where we are. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like being very in tune, being very intuitive is absolutely necessary. And how did you peak for the show? How did that go? Did you fat load? How did you adjust training and nutrition leading up to the day itself?
Sure. So I actually managed the time I went to the gym, the days that I typically have a refeed, and my check-in days to coincide with when the actual competition day would be. So the competition day would be Sunday. My check-in days would be Friday, and basically I knew that I'd be on stage roughly 10 or 11 o'clock. So I always trained at 10 or 11 o'clock. Because it kind of makes sense if you give yourself a meal in the morning, okay, I don't feel bloated and I'm training in the gym. Well, that would kind of emulate what would happen on show day. So I know Jay Cutler used to do that as well. He used to manipulate his time he trained just so he could match when he'd be on stage because it makes
Yeah.
sense. Um, and in terms of what was the other part of your question? Sorry.
How you peaked nutrition wise for
Peaked.
the week leading up to
Sure.
it?
So I didn't do any depletion. I was depleted the last 2 months.
Yeah.
There was no depletion. I was
Yeah.
always depleted. My
Yeah.
training was I was slugging it in the gym. So one session I remember was 7 sets. It took me an hour and a half just because I was like falling asleep nearly in the gym. I was like
Wow.
trying to catch a breath, like I was forgetting to breathe.
Yeah.
Like my body, my blood pressure was probably really low at that point.
Yeah.
So no depletion at all. Basically, we just ran it like a normal week, but we had a high fat day. I believe it was Thursday and Friday, so I did 2 high days. Yes, that's right. The Thursday high day was, I believe, 150 extra grams of fat.
Okay.
The second high day, which was Friday, was I think 100 grams of fat. Saturday was baseline diet, but during this time I wasn't training at all, so I wasn't depleting, so my body would hold up, sort of thing. On show day was effectively take a dandelion extract tablet. I think I had two of those. Have a black coffee in the morning, had normal breakfast. I did actually utilize beef jerky, so dehydrated beef jerky, added extras, just salt and beef. And they were really, really nice and they digest really well.
Okay.
That fat that kind of melts in your hand.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of nutrition in a small space. I knew that's not going to make me bloated, and it's carnivore and it's clean, two ingredients.
Right.
So I had that on show days, just snacking on that, pretty much. And yeah, I mean, I felt really good on the day. You kind of get that adrenal hit when you're on show day because you're like, well, I spent all this time dieting for it. If I'm gonna, push the pedal and give it the beans, give it the gas, sort of thing. Now's the time to do it. So
Yeah.
you always have that, but in the back of your mind, you sort of nail it on the show day. So I had really good stage presence.
Yeah.
The judges pretty much gave me straight firsts the moment I stepped on stage. So what basically happened was I'll just go into this because it's quite interesting for me, and it's one of my goals I sort of had in my head, but I didn't know I could really achieve. Um, and what it was, I did my posing routine, all good, fine. Came off stage, everyone else did theirs. I think I had 5 or 6 other competitors, all pretty good guys, quite muscular, quite lean, sort of thing. And then I went back on stage again. Everyone else came on stage as well. We did our quarter turns. So, yeah, I think it's just our quarter turns. Then they moved me from the outside to the middle, but then the judges stopped looking at me. They weren't looking at me at all, and I was like, right, I'm in the middle of the stage here. I'm being overlooked. Like, am I just being shunned away because I've got like an obvious problem or something? I don't know. Um, I didn't know what was going on. That struck me a bit, but I was like, didn't this happen to Phil Heath and Lee Haney in the
Yeah,
past?
you clearly won.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, I've probably won then. But I was surprised because when you're backstage, you see these guys like this guy has shredded glutes, this guy has massive quads, this guy has big biceps. Don't let it fool you. I was the tallest, lightest skeleton on stage.
Yeah.
Um, I was the lightest guy on stage, and in the tanning beforehand, I realized that a lot of guys would just didn't take it that seriously by the sounds of it. And I say that because I've got evidence to back it up. Now, most of them were carb loading on 5,000 calories for the week straight. They all had puffy faces, or most of them had puffy faces. I was like, okay, well, they've obviously not been able to diet hard enough. So they tried to, go for the fullness look. And
Yeah.
it showed. They weren't shredded. There's one guy who came second who was shredded. But other than that, there wasn't the level of conditioning that you'd expect from a classic bodybuilding show in the UK. But they still had really good muscularity. But what I beat them on was conditioning, posing, stage presence, good tan, clear skin. Um, what else? Confidence, and just having a symmetrical body. So if you look at the photos, you might put in the thumbnail or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But you can clearly see, you compare my body to their body, there was nothing missing. They all even missed calves, legs, arms. We turned them round, there's no lats to them, or whatever it was, there's deficiency in their physique. So that's how I beat them. I didn't beat them by being, the most shredded guy, or the biggest guy. I beat them by being the best all round, which is the look I was going for. And my coach was quite shocked, if I'm honest. Not because he didn't believe me or have faith in me, but because he didn't realize I could get all the way through the contest prep with the handicaps that I had. In the post-show interview, I nearly broke down because it was so emotional because I wasn't expecting to actually win. For me, it's more about, maybe it's a bit too deep for this podcast, but for me, it's about fighting back at the universe for something which happened to me, which was not my fault. So it's my way of like claiming back control, as in to say, no, you can't fuck with me. This is my body, and I'm going to take it as far as I can. Because
Yeah.
the thing is, I could just go about my life and not bodybuild, not go to the gym. I'd be in more pain. I wouldn't have that serotonin endorphin release. I wouldn't be as fit. I'd be binge eating, I'd be miserable, I wouldn't be motivated to, come on podcasts, do videos, stuff like that. So bodybuilding's given me a sense of life which I would otherwise not have. So it's kind of me paying testament to that on a bodybuilding stage and showing people what can be done. Because I know there's other people out there that I interview and speak with, consult with, offline, and they're in a terrible state. I work with mostly carnivores, people on the carnivore diet, and so many of them are like, "Oh, I can't do this because this." I'm like, "Well, I did it, so you can do it." And I want
Yeah.
people to achieve that for themselves, so they have that same satisfaction, self-worth, pride that I achieved. I apologize if it doesn't sound humble at all with my experience, but you've got to wake up and smell the roses sometimes. I think a lot of
Yeah.
bodybuilders will compete. For example, you won your show and I believe the overall. You could look back and think, "Oh, I could look better," or you could just say, "I fucking smashed these guys, and I'm an absolute rookie noob on stage." So it kind of goes to show you, like, yeah, take notice of what you've achieved. A lot of people
Yeah.
don't do that; they're too humble, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's an excellent point. And I love the idea of fighting back against the hard hand you've been dealt. I actually recently got a tattoo, and it's a, let me try to flip it. It's a phoenix. Um and I got a phoenix because it represents resilience and rebirth, and always being able to start again and keep going despite setbacks and life's challenges. And so that message you spoke about definitely resonates. I really like that.
That's super cool. I like that.
Yeah. um That's awesome. And uh, talk about what you learned. You mentioned you collected a lot of data. The goal is the British National Championships. What are you going to change or do differently this time around, that you think will make you even more successful?
I think trying to figure out a way to nail down sleep.
Mm.
Now, obviously, I'm a bit of a biohacker like yourself. I like to sort of, blue blocking glasses, red light therapy, no screens at night, blue light filter. I practice all these things. I physically do all these things. I don't just talk about it online. That only I find takes you so far. When you're very, 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 very lean, your body does not want to sleep. It wants to do something. It's you get this feeling of like wired but tired. But I think my ability to endure superseded the fact that I was fucked the entire time. The fact that I've, lived with chronic fatigue for since the age of 14, being tired is quite normal for me. I don't relish it at all. I hate it, but I know exactly what it's like. I know what it's like to feel really uncomfortable, where you're sat there at night thinking, oh, if I could just sleep about an extra hour in that morning, not wake up at 5 and be starving hungry. That's one thing about a diet. Actually, I didn't really get hungry. My protein intake was so high. But
Yeah.
as a bodybuilder, when you're that lean, you do get energy hungry. As
Mm,
in, if you just gave me like 1,000 grams of fat and put it in my body, I'd feel better.
yeah.
But obviously, you can't do that if you're trying to compete and get shredded. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's kind of a toll you paid. It's like paying the devil, I guess. You kind of know what it's going to give you, but it is going to cost you something. So a word of warning out there to guys: when you get into good shape like Scott or myself, then every time you compete, you're taking years or months off your life. Every single time. You're not going to live longer for it. Unless you're 400 pounds and go down to 200 pounds, yeah, you're probably going to feel better. But that's not the case for most bodybuilders. Most of us will walk around 10, 20% body fat year round. So
Yeah. Yeah. Sleep is so crucial. And thankfully I slept really well through pretty much all of prep until like the last week. Surprising because I have a history of insomnia, but my body just loves being lighter. It feels so much better when I'm smaller. And then coming out of prep, I decided to look into a CPAP, sleep apnea machine. And even though I was well below the threshold for being diagnosed with sleep apnea, I think it's above 10 events per hour. I had like 3 events per hour. It still improved my sleep dramatically. And I had tried one a few years ago, but I was doing it all myself. I just bought a machine, tried to figure it out. and I couldn't get it to work. The mask was always uncomfortable. It always felt like I was being suffocated. I think the pressure was just way too high. It was at like a 10 or 11, and now mine runs at a 4. But I found a company that they work with you. They help you find the right mask. They help configure the machine for you. And so that's been a huge game changer for me. So I'm optimistic that my sleep will be even better for my next prep.
Yeah, a lot of guys do report that. I did the same as yourself. I tried to get one. I couldn't suss out how to use it. I found it awkward. I don't like stuff on my face.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did a sleep test. I don't have it. For me, it was more a fact of lying there in pain,
Yeah.
and being almost capped on the painkillers that I'm prescribed to be able to use. So
Yeah.
I use medical cannabis. For me, knowing my health state, I try to be more careful than most people. So I didn't want to use over the counter, paracetamol, ibuprofen. I
Yeah.
think it's acetaminophen over there, something like that.
Yeah.
These sort of drugs. I was like, well, these are going to damage my liver. My body's already
Yeah.
struggling to churn out energy. It's not going to help me. It
Yeah.
it might mean that I sleep a few nights, but there's always a caveat. So
Yeah.
I doubled down on Tudka, NAC, all the liver support supplements.
Yeah.
Um, and that was in the absence of using most painkillers other than the medical cannabis. So yeah, I mean, it's a tough call. There's not always much you can do, but
Yeah.
I think in that your kind of state, Scott, where you're trying to gain muscle and gain body weight, but lean body weight, is a sensible approach, and you're only going to benefit from using every little, 1% here and there
Yeah.
hack that you can.
Yeah. I was using cannabis to relax at night and help with sleep a little bit as well. And I eventually found uh, it started making my mind race when I would shut my eyes and lie down on the pillow. And I got into this state of just overthinking. And then I switched to Delta 8 THC, and I didn't have the effect. And then after like a year, it started having the same effect on me. Um, and so now I actually use Kratom a few days a week, which I found really helpful for relaxing and um, pain management and things like that. But yeah, the NSAIDs are really scary. When I was in my rowing days and I had my back injuries, not nearly as bad as yours, but I was in chronic pain. I couldn't get out of bed some days, and I used Aleve every day for 3 years. And no one had warned me at the time that you're not supposed to take it long term. And I think that in large was a contributor to my hormonal problems and what forced me to get on TRT because I was an otherwise healthy individual. I was training, sleeping, worked a very stressful job, but eating well, and uh, my total testosterone was 100 nanograms per deciliter, which is like well below the reference range. And I had below osteoporosis levels of bone mass as a 24-year-old. So that's what prompted me to start TRT. But yeah, I don't recommend, and I personally don't use NSAIDs if I can ever avoid them. And then I had a very bad back spasm 2 years ago. And I went to the emergency room and they gave me tramadol, which is an opioid, and it didn't help at all. It just made me feel crappy. So yeah, it's strange how some of these prescription drugs just don't really help for
Yeah,
different types
I
of
went
pain.
for the same boat for about 3, 4 years as well. The codeine, the tramadol, paracetamol, ibuprofen. I was on them for years, and I had, elevated liver markers, but the guys, the medical system didn't care. You got a bad stomach canal, you get an acid reflux. Oh, here's PPIs, here's omeprazole and all that sort of thing. Oh, increase your dose now. I was like, you're stacking it. At that time, I was about 21, 22 years old. You're stacking about 5 drugs on a 22-year-old person that should otherwise be healthy. Someone that trains, takes blood tests, eats well, I mean, I did eat a lot of junk food when I was trying to gain weight, but largely speaking, I'd eat a high protein, whole food sort of diet. And I'm still going through these motions, and no one tweets, this isn't right. This guy should
Yeah,
not be on this.
yeah,
So it took him 14 years to diagnose my spine injury, which was extremely obvious. So anyone that's looked at my Instagram or anything like that, you can see how messed up my spine was before surgery. And now it looks even worse. It's got a Meccano set with train tracks on it, which I can feel all the time, which is a bit weird, but
Yeah.
we live and learn.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Jonathan. Really appreciate you coming on. Really congratulations to you on your show, and more importantly, your success mentally and physically. I think the journey has been amazing to follow and super inspiring, and I'm really excited to see how you do in a few months. But regardless, you should just be so proud of what you've done and what you've accomplished and how far you've come. It's really, really impressive.
Yeah, cheers, Scott. I appreciate you having me on. I do love all your interviews, and if anyone's watching this and they're not subscribed yet, do it. I mean, this guy's got so much content, and I understand you don't put too much time into like the thumbnails and things because it's ended up being so much faff after a while. But
Yeah,
watch the content. Look at the titles, find what resonates with you, and there's loads of gold gems, golden nuggets, and
thank
so
you.
many of these like hour-long videos. They're worth going through. If you're sat on a bus, if you're traveling to work, listen to some of them because they're worthwhile. And Scott does make the effort to bring on whereas represented people that are relevant in the industry that also share their knowledge and insights, which you don't often find with a lot of people. A lot of the times it's just a few guys that go to the gym together, but Scott goes through them with like a needle in a haystack trying to work out who the best ones to interview are. And he's done a cracking job. But yeah, if anyone wants to follow me, I'm Carnivore Muscle on YouTube, Carnivore Muscle in Instagram, and website's compositionconsultant.com.
Awesome.
Yeah, cheers.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the kind words, Jonathan. And likewise, if anyone's interested in a lot of deep dive free, amazing information, check out Jonathan's channel and his Instagram, and I'll have links to both of those in the show notes.